Hey guys, welcome to Herding Little Cows to the Glory of God. Here's my helper.
Hi,
What's your name?
Abigail.
Abigail. And this little guy is Elisha. He's not really helping. Anyway, we are on the Build a Pantry $5 challenge, and this is week 3, and we're going to show you how to make English muffin bread. You'll notice that these are not the packages I bought at the store, but I'm using my stores so that I can continue showing you what I bought at the store. But you're going to be able to make this with the items that you purchased. I also want to say before I forget, because this video will be in parts, I'm going to turn my oven. This bread cooks at 350. My oven is not calibrated correctly, so my oven will not say 350 when I bake it later. But just so you know, it's 350. We usually make this batch of bread. We make 3 loaves at a time. We are making 1 loaf today. So, you ready to help?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, first thing we're gonna do is we are adding 1 packet of yeast. Then, okay, if you've made bread before, you might think that some of the things I'm saying are just known for bread makers, but I also know there's people following this that don't make these recipes. This recipe is really, really easy to make. You don't have to knead the bread and all of that stuff, but I'm going to explain it out for somebody who's never used a recipe like this before. Yeast comes in packets of 2 teaspoons, like 2 1/4 teaspoons per packet. If you have one of the jars of yeast, you can measure out 2 1/4 teaspoons anytime that it calls for a packet of yeast. The next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna add water. We have 1 2/3 cups of water here. And what you want to do is be able to put your finger in it so it feels slightly warm. You don't even want it like bathtub warm. You want it to be just slightly warm on your finger, like you would think of a baby's bottle of milk. That will help the yeast grow. So go ahead, you can add that. Now, the yeast to grow wants to eat sugar. So we're gonna add the sugar for the recipe, which is 1 tablespoon of sugar. So go ahead and add that. And now we're gonna give it a quick mix. Okay. And we're going to let that sit for a minute to make sure that the yeast is good. So we will be back in just a minute. Okay, so you just saw a time-lapse video. What you're looking for is for your yeast to do that. That means that your yeast is good and growing. If you look at other videos that I've made in the past, I don't always do this step because I use my yeast often and I know that it's good. If you have a bigger container of yeast, you can keep it in the freezer and use it directly from the freezer into your recipe, and it will still do its growing and everything, but it doesn't die in your freezer. But if you have these packets and they are unopened, you do not need to refrigerate them. Once you open a package like a jar of yeast, you need to keep it refrigerated because these are little living organisms. So anyway, you're looking for your yeast to do what you saw in that time lapse. It's gonna do it slower than what you saw in the time lapse. But once you get that, you know your yeast is growing, so you can use the rest of your ingredients. So now we're gonna do 2 teaspoons of salt. We use Himalayan pink sea salt regularly in our house, so that's what I happen to have. But the salt that I bought on the challenge works perfectly fine for this. I just want to be able to keep those containers so I can show you guys as we go on. Here's week 1, here's week 2, here's week 3. So either salt works the exact same. You're okay. Okay, now mix that up a little bit with the salt in it. Oh, I forgot a 1/3 of a cup mixer. So typically when I make this recipe, it's tripled, so it has an even amount of flour cups, but this one didn't. Okay, typically when you measure flour, you're supposed to take, not take the knife, you're supposed to take a scoop and pour the flour like this to make sure that it is nice and aerated, that there's air in it, rather than just scooping into the bucket. Oh, I know. And then you take a knife and you scrape off the top. So there's 1 cup. How I typically cook though, is I scoop it, and it's just not quite full. And I say, there's 2 cups. This recipe is really hard to mess up. So then I take the 1/3 of a cup and I scoop it close, just a little under. I needed 2 2/3 cups. So there we go. And now you mix it. You're gonna have flour all over. Keep mixing, keep mixing. And you're not trying to knead this bread, but you can mix this bread till it's very, very mixed. Like with muffins, you don't want to overmix them.
I didn't
right?
this morning.
You didn't, oh wait, hold on. I read the recipe wrong because I actually need a whole nother cup because I only did 2.
I was gonna say, I thought you said 3 2/3.
I did.
Whatever.
Okay, so here's my last cup. I was like, that doesn't look right. There we go. So you're gonna mix it. It's going to be hard to mix, but not impossible. The 9-year-old can do it. You can do it. And like I said, as long as you don't add more flour than the recipe calls for, this recipe is hard to mess up. I did have a friend that I gave this recipe to though, and she put it, like you should mix it just with a fork in a bowl. Don't use a stand mixer. This friend thought she was supposed to get a loaf of bread, and so she put it in a stand mixer, was mixing it for a long, long, long time, and kept adding flour because it wasn't the right consistency. Okay, I'm gonna take over.
Yes.
So you just keep mixing till all the flour's mixed in. It's okay if there's still some on the sides, but like that, it all came together. All the flour is mixed in, this little bit on the side is okay. And now you're going to leave that until it about doubles in size. It's that easy. Okay, so you saw a time lapse that rose for 20, 25 minutes, something like that. It depends on how hot your house is, on how much it'll rise. So right now in the summer, it'll take about 20, 25 minutes. In the winter, it might take an hour to rise to about double of what it was. So now Abigail, the pan got buttered. You can use any type of oil you have in the house. This is not on the challenge. You need oil that is in your house. It can be butter, it can be olive oil, it can be coconut oil, it can be the spray oil that you might spray like in your air fryer type thing. Any type of oil and a bread pan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people have bread pans that are smaller than this. Like this is a standard size bread pan, but like if you had 2 smaller bread pans, you could make it in that also, just do half the dough in each one. Okay, so you're gonna just scrape this with a scraper into the pan. Everybody else is sitting at the table because they're waiting to finish do an art thing. I just had to get these in the oven. So while we made 1 loaf, I told you that we typically make 3 loaves for our family. And so, no, I know, we typically make 3 for our family. The recipe that I typically use makes 3 loaves. So we're gonna make a total of 4 loaves today because this was the one I mixed up for you. We'll keep this one separate so you can see it. But Josiah helped me mix this up.
Good job, Josiah.
So what we're gonna do now,
Were you cooking? Yeah.
so we're gonna let this rise until it gets to about the top of the pan, okay? So you're gonna let that rise. I'm going to turn my oven on. For me, I'm turning it on to 360 degrees. Oops, I'm pushing the wrong button. I don't want to time it. Mostly, you would turn it on to 350. We're gonna let that preheat because we know that this is only gonna take 15 or 20 minutes because of how fast the first rise went. So I'm gonna put the rest of the bread in and I'll show you when we're ready to put it in the oven. Okay, so the bread is done. So the one that we put in, that Abigail helped me with, was this one. You saw us put it in the oven before, but that's not gonna have any sound on it. So now you take your bread, pour it out. Little of mine stuck, but that's okay. And you kind of want to tap on it to see if it sounds hollow. So that's the sound you're looking for. So we'll be back in a few minutes when we cut it open. Okay, so ours cooked for about 55 minutes. We took it out. It could have maybe gone just a little bit less, but this is what it was because we were in the middle of doing stuff. It's still hot. You usually want to wait till it's cool, but nobody around here wants to wait, do you?
We want to eat?
You want to eat?
Yeah.
So when you cut the bread, It's nice and fluffy. I don't know if you see, but
Pocket.
there's like pockets, so it holds the butter. Hold on.
Butter pockets.
So I'm gonna cut. I'm gonna cut starting at the butt. We have people around here who like the butt, but mommy's gonna take the butt this time.
I do
We
not
call
like the butt.
We call this the butt. Do you call it, some people say the nose or the heel, the end. I don't know what you call it at your house. We call it the butt.
Butt.
So,
It's a butt. Because it looks
so
like
here
a
is what your English muffin bread is gonna look like. And then in the challenge, you can eat it just like this. It tastes great just like this. It also tastes good with butter. Sorry, I'm in the light. It also tastes good with butter or something else like that on it. But in this week's thing, we also bought eggs. So all you need to do is fry up an egg, put an egg on top, put another piece of bread on top. You have an egg sandwich. That's some other recipe.
Another recipe.
You won't be seeing that one. But if you just put an egg on top and put another piece of bread, you have an egg sandwich. So you have a complete meal right there in the things we bought over the past 3 weeks for $15. You also have a lot of food left at the end of this challenge. Like, you still have flour and stuff left. I will give you a total in just a minute. Okay, so wrap up video for the English muffin bread. So you saw us, we mixed up the bread, we let it rise. We greased some pans, poured the batter, dough, whatever you want to say, into the pan, let it rise again, and then we baked it, and then we ate it, and it was really, really good. So while you do this challenge, you're going to be building up things to use in the future at your own home that will actually save you money. So we calculated the cost of making this English muffin bread. What I did was I took the bag of flour that you saw in the original videos that I bought at the store, and it said that it had 75 servings at a 1/4 cup each. So we figured out how many cups were in that bag, and then we divided with the price and everything and found out how much it cost per cup. So using 12 cents a cup for flour, less than a cent for sugar, less than a cent for salt, and 38 cents for a packet of yeast, it cost 77 cents to make the bread, like to make the actual dough of the bread. It then cost another 65 cents to run the oven. So 77 plus 65 would be $1.42 to make your loaf of bread. But because I made 4 loaves, I was cooking it at the same time. So whether that is cooking multiple loaves at the same time, or you like cooking maybe baked potatoes in the oven while you're cooking your bread, or cooking your casserole at the same time you're cooking your bread, you're lowering the per item cost for bread. Then I was telling you that we also bought eggs this week. So if you take the 77 cents that it costs to make the bread, and let's say that you cooked it in the oven with something else, so it's about $1 between the electricity and the actual cost of making the bread. It's about $1 per loaf. It would have been cheaper also had you bought yeast in a bigger container, but because we're trying to keep it at the $5 a week, the yeast costs more. So anyway, if you had made the whole loaf of bread and you then decided to cook 2 eggs so you could have an egg sandwich, so 2 pieces of bread plus the 2 eggs, it would cost $1.44 to make an egg sandwich, and you would still have most of your loaf of bread left. So you could then make egg sandwiches for your entire week. So if you take the bread and you cut it into slices, you can then freeze the slices in the freezer, and when you take them out, you throw them in the toaster and you have a fresh piece of bread. So that's after you bake it. So bake it, cool it, cut it into slices. You can then freeze those slices. So you could, for the week, you could make breakfast sandwiches, 2 eggs every morning. So this would be for 6 days. For $3.68 would be your bread and your eggs. So that's a pretty cheap breakfast to make. So anyway, we're doing this to help you learn how to save money. I'm going to make another bread recipe, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, where we're going to show you how to make French bread. And again, you'll use the same ingredients of what you bought. You're not going to be able to make all of these recipes from the one single time you purchased from the pantry challenge, but all of these recipes can be made from the things you're purchasing in the pantry challenge. So thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, leave them down below. If you try to make this bread and you enjoy it, leave that comment below. If you make the bread and it doesn't turn out or you don't enjoy it, leave it down below. Let us know what you're thinking of this challenge. We'll talk to you guys next time on Herding Little Cows to the Glory of God.